The letter should have turned to ash, but it did not, and that was the first sign something was wrong. Daniel Brooks stood alone in his small cabin, the fire crackling low in the iron stove as winter pressed against the walls like a quiet weight that never left. The air smelled of wood smoke and cold iron, the kind of scent that clung to a place where time moved slower than it should. He held the envelope just inches above the flame, watching the edges curl slightly, but never catch. It should have burned. Everything else had. Old photos, worn papers, fragments of a life he no longer wanted to carry. But this one stayed intact, untouched, as if the fire itself refused to take it. Behind him, Rex shifted from where he lay near the door, his head lifting slowly, ears angling forward. He did not bark. He did not move right away. He simply watched. Daniel lowered the letter slightly, his brow tightening as he turned it in his hand. No return address. No stamp. Just his name, written in a way that reached deeper than ink on paper ever should. A way he recognized without wanting to. Not possible, he murmured, his voice low, almost swallowed by the room. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying a faint whistle that slipped through the cracks of the cabin like a breath from somewhere far away. Rex stood now, stepping closer with quiet certainty, his paws making soft, deliberate sounds against the wooden floor. He stopped at Daniel's side, his gaze fixed not on the man, but on the letter itself. His nose twitched once, then again, and something in his posture changed. Not alert. Not defensive. Familiar. Daniel noticed. He always noticed with Rex. It's just paper, he said, though the words felt thin the moment they left him. Rex did not look away. He leaned in slightly, close enough that Daniel could feel the warmth of his breath against his hand. The fire popped behind them, a brief spark rising, and in that flicker of light, something shifted inside Daniel's chest, something he had spent years locking down. He pulled the letter back fully, away from the flame, and stared at it again. His name stared back. Not printed. Not typed. Written. Slowly, he opened it. The paper inside unfolded with a soft sound that seemed too loud for such a small thing. He read the words once. Then again. Go north. I am still here. Daniel did not move. The cabin felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in just enough to make breathing feel different. No, he said quietly, but there was no strength behind it. Just habit. Rex turned then, stepping toward the door, his body already aligned with a direction Daniel had not yet chosen. He sat, facing outward, as if waiting for something inevitable. Daniel looked from the letter to the dog, then to the door, then back again. The fire crackled softly behind him, but it no longer felt warm. It felt distant. He folded the letter slowly, his hand steady even as something inside him was not. There's no one out there, he said, but this time the words barely formed at all. Rex did not react. He simply waited. And somehow, that was worse. Daniel stepped forward, each movement deliberate, like crossing a line he could not step back from. He reached for his coat, pulling it on without thinking, his mind already somewhere between past and present. When he opened the door, the cold hit him immediately, sharp and clean, carrying the scent of snow and pine and something else he could not name. Rex stepped out first. Of course he did. Daniel followed. And without saying another word, without looking back, he closed the door behind him and walked north. The snow does not fall, but it lingers in the air like something unfinished, suspended between sky and ground as Daniel Brooks moves forward with slow, measured steps, each foot pressing into the frozen earth with a sound that feels louder than it should in the quiet. The forest stretches ahead in long rows of pine, their branches heavy with frost, their shadows thin and pale under the early light. Rex walks a few feet ahead, not pulling, not rushing, just keeping a steady line north as if the direction itself is something he understands without needing to question. Daniel keeps his eyes forward at first, then down, then forward again, scanning the path like habit has trained him to do, but there is something different now. He is not looking for danger. He is looking for confirmation. This is nothing, he says quietly, the words carried away by the cold before they can settle, and even he knows they are not true. The air feels different out here, sharper, clearer, like every breath carries something just beyond recognition. After about half a mile, the trees begin to shift slightly, opening into a narrow stretch where the ground flattens and the snow thins just enough to reveal the surface beneath. Daniel slows without realizing it, his gaze drawn to the ground where faint impressions interrupt the otherwise smooth layer of frost. Footprints. Not fresh, but not gone either. Pressed into the earth in a way that suggests movement, direction, purpose. He crouches slightly, brushing his glove across one of them, feeling the shallow indentation beneath the cold surface. Old, he mutters, though the word does not carry certainty. Rex does not stop. He steps directly onto the same line of prints, his nose lowering briefly before lifting again, his pace unchanged, as if the path is already known. Daniel stands there for a moment longer, something tightening in his chest, then he follows. The forest grows quieter the farther they go, not empty, but still, as if sound itself has chosen to stay back. The wind softens, the distant noises fade, and what remains is the rhythm of their movement and the faint creak of branches shifting somewhere above. Daniel's breath comes steady, but his thoughts do not. They move in fragments now, small pieces surfacing without warning. A voice. A laugh. A promise made in a place far from snow. He pushes it down instinctively, the same way he has for years, but it does not stay buried as easily this time. Rex slows slightly, just enough to glance back, his amber eyes catching Daniel's for a brief second before returning forward. Not checking. Not questioning. Just acknowledging. Daniel exhales through his nose, long and controlled, and keeps moving. Another mile passes. Then another. The ground begins to rise gently, the terrain shifting into low ridges and shallow dips that break the straight line of the forest. The footprints continue, fading in places, reappearing in others, like a trail that refuses to disappear completely. Then Daniel sees it. A mark on one of the trees, carved lightly into the bark, 2 lines crossing at an angle. Simple. Almost careless. But not random. His steps slow again, this time deliberately. He reaches out, touching the mark with the edge of his glove, tracing it once, then pulling back. No, he whispers, but the word carries less resistance now. It is not denial. It is recognition trying to hold its ground. Rex stands a few yards ahead, waiting this time, his posture still, his focus unwavering. Daniel looks from the mark to the dog, then beyond, into the deeper stretch of forest where the light grows thinner and the shadows longer. The direction is clear. It has been clear since the moment the letter refused to burn. He straightens slowly, the weight in his chest shifting, not lighter, but different. More defined. More present. All right, he says under his breath, though he is not sure who he is answering anymore. Rex turns and continues forward, and this time Daniel does not hesitate. He follows, step for step, deeper into the forest, into the quiet, into something that is no longer just a path, but a memory waiting to be faced. The forest begins to change in a way Daniel Brooks cannot fully explain, not in shape or structure, but in feeling, like the air itself has grown heavier with something unseen, something waiting just beyond the reach of logic. The path narrows as the trees close in, their branches forming a loose canopy that filters the pale daylight into thin, shifting lines across the snow. Rex slows slightly, his pace no longer steady but deliberate, each step placed with quiet precision as if the ground beneath him carries more than just frost and earth. Daniel notices the shift immediately. He always does. You feel it too, he murmurs, though the words are barely audible, carried away by the stillness before they can settle. Rex does not respond in any way that resembles acknowledgement, but his ears remain forward, his posture firm, his attention fixed ahead. That is enough. Daniel exhales slowly, his breath visible in the cold, and keeps moving, though the weight in his chest grows more defined with each step. It is no longer uncertainty. It is recognition trying to surface. Another 100 yards pass, then another, and the terrain begins to rise more sharply, forming a low ridge that breaks the forest line. Rex climbs it without hesitation, his body steady against the incline, and pauses at the top. Daniel follows, boots slipping slightly against the frozen ground before finding hold. When he reaches the crest, he stops. Not because he chooses to, but because something in front of him demands it. There, partially hidden between the trees, stands a structure that does not belong to the wild silence surrounding it. A cabin. Small. Weathered. Leaning slightly as if time has pressed against it from one side for years. The wood is grey with age, the roof dusted with a thin layer of snow that has settled unevenly, and the windows are dark, reflecting nothing back. It should look abandoned. It should feel empty. It does not. Daniel's breath catches, not sharply, but enough to break the rhythm he has been holding since they left. No, he says quietly, though the word carries no real denial. Rex steps forward first, descending the ridge with the same calm certainty that brought them here. Daniel remains where he is for a moment longer, eyes fixed on the cabin, scanning it the way he would any unfamiliar structure, noting the angles, the stillness, the absence of movement. But beneath all that, something deeper moves through him, something that does not belong to training or instinct. Memory. He swallows once, the motion slow, controlled, and then he follows. The distance between them and the cabin closes quickly, though it feels stretched, each step carrying more weight than the last. The air changes again as they approach, losing the faint movement of wind, becoming still in a way that feels intentional. Rex slows near the edge of the clearing, his head lifting slightly, nose catching something Daniel cannot. He does not bark. He does not hesitate. He simply continues forward. The cabin door comes into view, slightly ajar, the dark space beyond it visible only as a thin line. Daniel's gaze locks onto it immediately. You see that, he mutters, though. Rex does not need to answer. He already knows. Daniel steps onto the clearing, boots pressing into the untouched snow, leaving the first marks this place has likely seen in a long time. The silence deepens, wrapping around them in a way that feels almost deliberate, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Rex reaches the porch first, placing one paw onto the worn wood, the board creaking softly under his weight. He pauses there, just for a second, then looks back. Not questioning. Not waiting. Just acknowledging that this is where it leads. Daniel steps up beside him, his eyes moving slowly across the door, the frame, the small details that feel too familiar for a place he has never been. And that is when he sees it. Carved faintly into the wood near the handle, almost hidden by time and wear, is the same symbol from the trees. Two lines crossing. Simple. Intentional. His chest tightens, the feeling deeper now, no longer avoidable. You did this, he whispers, though he does not say the name. He does not need to. Rex nudges the door gently, pushing it open just enough for the darkness inside to widen. Daniel does not stop him. He cannot. The path that began with a letter that refused to burn has led here, to a place that should not exist, to a moment he cannot walk away from. He reaches out slowly, his hand hovering near the door before finally pressing against it, pushing it open fully. The hinges give a soft, tired sound, and as the interior reveals itself piece by piece, Daniel steps forward, crossing the threshold into something that is no longer just a place, but a truth he has been circling for far too long. The moment Daniel Brooks steps inside, the air changes in a way that feels immediate and undeniable, colder than outside, but not empty, not abandoned, as if the space has been holding onto something that refuses to fade. The light from the doorway stretches across the wooden floor in a long, pale line, illuminating dust that hangs suspended, unmoving, like time itself has slowed within these walls. Rex enters first, his pause silent now, his posture lower, more careful, as if he understands that this place is not meant to be disturbed, only approached. Daniel follows a step behind, his eyes adjusting slowly, scanning the interior with the same discipline he has carried for years, but something beneath that training begins to surface, something more personal, more difficult to control. The room is simple. A narrow cot rests against the far wall, its blanket folded neatly, not tossed aside or forgotten. A small wooden table stands near the center, worn but stable, its surface clean in a way that does not match the dust elsewhere. A single chair sits slightly angled, as if someone stood up from it not long ago. Nothing here feels random. Nothing feels abandoned. Daniel exhales slowly, the sound quiet but uneven, and steps further inside, the floor creaking faintly beneath his weight. Rex moves toward the table, his nose lowering just slightly, drawing in the scent that lingers there. He does not bark. He does not react with urgency. He simply stops. Daniel notices immediately. He always notices when Rex stops like that. He follows, each step slower now, the space between movement and memory narrowing with every inch. When he reaches the table, he sees it. A pair of dog tags resting at the center, placed carefully, not dropped, not forgotten, but left. Waiting. The metal catches the faint light from the doorway, dull but unmistakable. Daniel does not reach for them right away. He stands there, looking, his breathing steady but deeper now, as if his body understands before his mind allows it. No, he says quietly, but the word does not carry denial anymore. It carries recognition. Rex remains beside the table, still, his gaze fixed on the tags, his presence calm in a way that feels almost reverent. Daniel finally lifts his hand, slow, deliberate, as if the space itself demands respect. His fingers close around the chain, the metal cold against his skin, and he lifts them gently, the faint clink echoing louder than it should in the silence. He turns them slightly, bringing them closer to the light. The engraving comes into view, one line at a time, each detail cutting deeper than the last. Name. Rank. Blood type. Information meant to identify, to confirm, to never be lost. His jaw tightens, his eyes narrowing slightly as the letters settle into place, not as something new, but as something remembered. He does not say the name. He does not need to. It is already there, heavier than the tags themselves. Rex shifts closer, his shoulder brushing lightly against Daniel's leg, grounding him without force, without demand. Daniel exhales slowly, the breath leaving him in a controlled stream, but his hand does not steady completely. Not yet. His eyes move from the tags to the rest of the table, and that is when he sees it. A folded piece of paper, placed beside where the tags had been, its edges clean, its position precise. Not hidden. Not forgotten. Left for him. The realization settles quietly, but fully. This was not chance. This was not coincidence. This was intention. Daniel lowers the tag slightly, his fingers still wrapped around the chain, and reaches for the paper with his other hand. He hesitates for just a fraction of a second, not out of fear, but because he understands that whatever is written there will not leave him unchanged. Then he unfolds it. The paper opens with a soft, deliberate sound, and his eyes move across the words slowly, taking them in one line at a time. The handwriting is steady. Familiar. Unmistakable. If you made it here, then you followed the signs. Daniel's breath catches, subtle but real, the rhythm breaking just enough to matter. His gaze lingers, then continues. I knew you would not ignore it forever. The words do not rush him. They do not demand anything. They simply exist, waiting to be understood. Rex lowers himself gently beside the table, his body relaxed now, but his eyes still lifted toward Daniel, present, steady, as if this moment is the reason they came. Daniel stands there, the tags in one hand, the letter in the other, the quiet weight of both settling into him in a way he cannot push away. The cabin does not feel empty. It feels like it has been waiting. And now, finally, he is here. Daniel Brooks does not lower the paper right away, not because he is unsure, but because the words hold him in place in a way nothing else has for a long time, steady and quiet, like they have been waiting for him to finally read them. His eyes move across the lines again, slower now, not searching, but absorbing. The handwriting does not waver. It does not rush. It carries the same calm certainty he remembers, the kind that never needed to be spoken twice to be understood. He exhales softly, the breath uneven for just a moment before settling again, and lowers the letter slightly, his gaze drifting back to the dog tags in his other hand. The metal feels different now. Not colder. Not heavier. Just known. Rex remains beside him, still and grounded, his presence steady in a way that anchors the room, as if everything that matters is already here and nothing else needs to be added. Daniel glances around the cabin again, but this time he is not scanning for threats or exits. He is noticing. The small details that did not register before now stand out with quiet clarity. The blanket on the cot is folded with care, edges aligned. The chair near the table is angled just slightly, as if someone had stood from it not long ago and never returned. The cup on the corner of the table is clean, untouched by dust, positioned within reach. None of it feels accidental. None of it feels forgotten. It feels prepared. Daniel's chest tightens, not sharply, but deeply, as understanding begins to settle into something more solid. This was not a place left behind. This was a place held. He looks back down at the letter, his fingers tightening slightly around the paper, and continues reading. I left what I could. Not because I thought you would come soon, but because I knew you would come eventually. The words do not accuse. They do not demand. They simply state what was believed. Daniel's jaw shifts slightly, the movement subtle but real, as something inside him begins to give way, not breaking, but opening. A memory surfaces, clearer than before, no longer just a fragment but a moment. Two figures sitting side by side, quiet after a long day, speaking about what happens when things do not go as planned, about how to leave something behind that can still be followed. Leave signs. Make it simple. Make it something only we would recognize. Daniel blinks once, the image fading but not disappearing, leaving behind a feeling that lingers in the space between breath and thought. Rex shifts slightly, pressing his shoulder gently against Daniel's leg again, the contact brief but grounding. Daniel lowers the letter fully now, his hand steady, and places it back on the table with care, smoothing it once as if that small action carries meaning. His gaze moves again, slower this time, more intentional, and it settles on the far side of the room, near the base of the wall where the light falls unevenly across the floor. Something about that area feels different. Not obvious. Not loud. Just enough to draw his attention. Rex notices it too. Of course he does. He rises from his position beside the table and walks toward that corner, his steps measured, his nose lowering slightly as he approaches. He stops just short of the wall, looking down at the floor, then back at Daniel. Not asking. Not urging. Just showing. Daniel follows, each step deliberate, the distance closing slowly as the weight of the moment builds in a way that feels quiet but undeniable. He kneels near the spot, his eyes tracing the faint lines in the wood, the subtle shift in texture that would go unnoticed by anyone not looking for it. His hand moves forward, brushing lightly across the surface, feeling the difference beneath his fingertips. A board. Slightly raised. Slightly worn in a way that does not match the rest. He pauses there, his hand resting on it, his breath steady but deeper now. This is not chance. This is not coincidence. This is the next step. Rex remains beside him, silent, steady, his presence a constant reminder that this path has been there all along. Daniel exhales slowly, then grips the edge of the board and lifts. It gives with a soft resistance, then shifts upward, revealing a narrow space beneath the floor. The air that rises from it carries a different scent, older, preserved, untouched by the dust above. Daniel leans forward slightly, peering into the space, his heart moving in a rhythm he has not felt in years. Inside, wrapped carefully in cloth, is something waiting. Not hidden. Not lost. Waiting. And for the first time since the letter appeared, Daniel does not hesitate. He reaches in. Daniel Brooks does not rush the motion as he lifts the object from beneath the floor, his hand steady but careful, as if whatever rests within that cloth carries more than weight, something that demands patience rather than urgency. The fabric feels dry, preserved, its texture worn but intact, like it has been protected from time rather than left to it. Rex stands close beside him, his head lowered slightly, watching with a quiet intensity that does not waver, as if he already knows what is about to be revealed. Daniel places the bundle gently on the wooden floor in front of him, the light from the window catching along its edges, outlining its shape without fully exposing it. He pauses for a moment, his fingers resting lightly on the knot that holds it closed, his breath slow, controlled, but deeper now, as if something inside him is preparing before he even understands why. The cabin remains silent, the kind of silence that does not feel empty but full, like it is holding the space for this exact moment. Daniel begins to untie the cloth. The knot loosens with a soft pull, the fabric unfolding layer by layer, each movement revealing more of what has been kept hidden, not lost, but waiting. Inside, the first thing he sees is a photograph. Its edges are slightly worn, the surface faintly faded, but the image itself remains clear enough to hold its meaning. Two men stand side by side, younger, their expression steady, not forced, not posed, just present in a moment that once meant nothing more than being there together. Between them sits a German shepherd, ears tall, eyes bright, the kind of posture that speaks of loyalty without needing to show it. Daniel's hand stills. His gaze locks onto the image, not scanning, not analyzing, just seeing. His throat tightens slightly, not with pain, but with recognition that arrives all at once, without warning, without resistance. He does not need to study the details. He knows them. He remembers them. Rex shifts closer, lowering himself beside Daniel, his body pressed lightly against his leg, his presence steady and grounding in a way that requires no effort. Daniel's thumb moves slowly across the edge of the photograph, tracing it without realizing, as if the motion itself connects him to something that has been just out of reach for too long. Beneath the photograph lies another piece of paper, folded more tightly, placed with intention, as if it was meant to be found only after the image has been seen. Daniel notices it after a moment, his focus shifting slowly, deliberately, from what was to what still remains. He sets the photograph down carefully, not away from him, but within reach, then picks up the folded paper. The edges are firm, the crease sharp, like it has been opened and closed with care, not neglect. He unfolds it slowly. The handwriting is the same. There is no doubt now. Not in the lines. Not in the spacing. Not in the way each word sits on the page with quiet certainty. You always said you would come back if you could. Daniel's breath catches, subtle but undeniable, the rhythm breaking just enough to matter. His eyes remain fixed on the words as he continues. I did not need you to be on time. I just needed you to remember. The sentence settles into him in a way that nothing else has, not sharp, not overwhelming, but steady, like something finding its place after being carried too long without understanding. Daniel exhales slowly, the sound quiet, almost lost in the stillness of the room, and lowers the paper slightly, his gaze drifting back to the photograph beside him. The two men. The dog. A moment untouched by everything that came after. Rex lifts his head slightly, his eyes moving between Daniel and the photograph, not questioning, not urging, just present in the way he always is. Daniel sits there, the paper in one hand, the photograph at his side, the hidden space now open behind him, and for the first time since the journey began, he does not feel pulled in different directions. The path, the signs, the cabin, all of it narrows into something simple. Not a mystery. Not a question. A promise. And now, finally, he understands that it was never about finding someone waiting in the world outside. It was about finding what was left behind within himself, something he had not allowed to surface until now. He looks down at the words again, his fingers tightening slightly around the paper, not in resistance, but in acknowledgement. Then he nods once, small, almost imperceptible, but real. And in that quiet motion, something shifts, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the way that matters most. He remembers. Daniel Brooks does not move for a long moment after the realization settles, not because he cannot, but because there is nothing left to chase, nothing left to prove, only something to hold. The cabin remains quiet around him, the same stillness as before, but it feels different now, not heavy, not waiting, just present, as if its purpose has already been fulfilled. He picks up the photograph again, slower this time, his fingers more certain, less hesitant, as if the distance between memory and acceptance has finally closed. His eyes trace the image carefully, not searching for details, but allowing them to return on their own. The way they stood. The way the dog sat between them, steady and alert. The kind of moment that never feels important until it is the only thing left that matters. Rex shifts beside him, his body pressing lightly against Daniel's side, grounding him without effort, reminding him without words that he is not alone in this moment, never has been. Daniel exhales softly, the breath steady now, and sets the photograph down beside the folded note, aligning them without thinking, a small gesture that carries more meaning than he would have allowed before. He reaches for the dog tags again, lifting them gently, the chain sliding through his fingers with a soft metallic sound that no longer echoes but settles. He studies them for a second, then lowers them carefully onto the table, not as something to put away, but as something to leave where it belongs. The choice comes without struggle. That is what surprises him most. He does not need to take them. He does not need to carry them back. They were never meant to leave this place. They were meant to bring him here. Rex rises slowly, stretching once before stepping toward the door, his posture calm, his movement unhurried, as if the urgency that brought them has already passed. He pauses near the threshold, turning his head slightly, not asking, not urging, just acknowledging. Daniel watches him for a moment, then nods once, a quiet agreement that does not need to be spoken. He stands, the motion steady, the weight in his chest no longer pressing down but settling into something balanced, something that feels like it belongs. He takes one last look around the cabin, his gaze moving across the table, the cot, the floor, the small details that once felt like clues and now feel like closure. Nothing has changed. And yet everything has. He steps toward the door, the floor creaking softly beneath him, the sound familiar now, no longer intrusive. When he reaches the threshold, he pauses, just for a second, his hand resting lightly against the frame. Not to hold on. Not to hesitate. Just to acknowledge. Then he steps outside. The cold air meets him again, sharp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and snow, but it does not bite the same way it did before. It feels clearer, lighter, like something that moves through him instead of against him. Rex steps forward, not leading this time, but walking beside him, his pace matching Daniel's without effort. They move away from the cabin together, their steps quiet against the snow, leaving fresh tracks that follow the same path but carry a different meaning. Daniel does not look back immediately. He lets a few steps pass, lets the rhythm of walking settle into something natural again, before turning his head just enough to see it one last time. The cabin stands unchanged, still, silent, part of the forest in a way that makes it feel like it has always been there and always will be. But Daniel no longer sees it as a place of questions. He sees it as a place that held something until he was ready to face it. He turns forward again without hesitation. The path ahead stretches out, familiar now, not because it has changed, but because he has. Rex moves slightly closer, his shoulder brushing lightly against Daniel's leg for a brief second, the contact simple, steady, enough. Daniel exhales slowly, the breath leaving him in a long, even stream, and for the first time in years, there is no weight behind it, no tension, no resistance. Just air. Just presence. Just forward. And as they walk, step by step, back through the quiet forest, Daniel understands something he has avoided for far too long. He did not come here to find someone waiting. He came here to stop leaving someone behind. And now, finally, he does not. The forest feels different on the way back, not because the trees have changed or the path has shifted, but because Daniel Brooks no longer walks through it as someone searching, but as someone who has already found what he did not know he was missing. The snow still crunches beneath his boots in the same steady rhythm, the air still carries the same scent of pine and cold, but everything moves with a quieter clarity now, like the world has settled into place around him instead of pressing against him. Rex walks at his side, not ahead, not guiding anymore, just present, his pace matching Daniel's naturally, his posture relaxed but aware in the way only he can be. The urgency that once pulled them forward is gone, replaced by something steadier, something that does not need to rush. Daniel keeps his eyes forward, but they no longer scan with tension. They observe. They take in the details without trying to interpret them. The faint line of the trail, the subtle rise and fall of the land, the way the light filters through the trees in long, soft beams that stretch across the snow like quiet markers of time. He exhales slowly, the breath leaving him in a smooth, even stream, no longer caught between hesitation and resistance. It simply exists, like everything else around him. After a while, he slows slightly, not out of fatigue, but because something in the stillness draws his attention. Rex notices immediately, of course, his head turning just slightly, ears shifting forward in quiet awareness. Daniel stops near a familiar stretch of trees, his gaze drifting toward one of them where the faint carving still rests against the bark. 2 lines crossing. Simple. Intentional. He steps closer, reaching out without thinking, his fingers brushing lightly over the mark again, tracing it once more, but this time the motion feels different. Not questioning. Not resisting. Just acknowledging. I see it now, he says quietly. The words barely more than a breath, but they settle in a way that feels complete. Rex stands beside him, still, his presence steady, as if this moment does not require movement, only recognition. Daniel lowers his hand slowly, stepping back from the tree, his eyes lingering for just a second longer before turning away. There is nothing left here to solve. Nothing left to follow. Only something to carry forward in a way that no longer feels heavy. They continue walking, the path opening slightly as the forest begins to thin, the distant outline of his cabin slowly coming back into view through the trees. It looks the same as it always has, small, quiet, standing against the wide stretch of land without drawing attention to itself. But Daniel sees it differently now. Not as a place to hide. Not as a place to forget. As a place to live. Rex moves slightly ahead for a few steps, then falls back again, his movement easy, unforced, as if the balance between them has shifted into something natural, something equal. When they reach the edge of the clearing, Daniel pauses once more, his gaze moving across the space slowly, taking in the familiar details with a new kind of clarity. The porch. The door. The faint trail leading back into the forest. Nothing has changed. And yet everything feels different. He steps forward, his boots pressing into the snow with quiet certainty, leaving a fresh line of tracks that overlap the ones from earlier, not erasing them, but continuing them. Rex follows beside him, close enough that their paths run nearly parallel, step for step. Daniel reaches the porch and stops, his hand resting briefly on the wooden railing, the surface cold beneath his fingers. He looks out once more toward the forest, the path now hidden again beneath distance and shadow, but he does not feel the need to trace it back. He knows where it leads. He knows what it holds. And more importantly, he knows that it is no longer something he needs to return to. Rex sits near the door, calm and patient, his eyes lifting toward Daniel for just a moment before settling again. Daniel nods slightly, not as a signal, but as an understanding, and reaches for the door. When it opens, the warmth inside meets him gently, not strong, but enough, the faint scent of wood and ash still lingering in the air. He steps inside, Rex following without hesitation, and as the door closes behind them with a soft, final sound, the quiet settles once more. But this time, it is not the kind of quiet that holds something back. It is the kind that lets everything be exactly where it belongs. The cabin settles into silence once more, but it is no longer the kind that presses against the walls or lingers in the corners waiting to be filled, it is the kind that rests, steady and complete, like something that has finally found its place. Daniel Brooks stands just inside the doorway for a moment, his hand still resting lightly against the wood as if marking the boundary between what was and what is now. The air inside carries the faint warmth of the earlier fire, mixed with the familiar scent of timber and ash, grounding in a way that feels different than before, not something to hide within, but something to return to. Rex moves past him slowly, circling once near the center of the room before settling near the door, his posture relaxed, his breathing even, as if the purpose that guided him has fully resolved into presence. Daniel steps further inside, his movements unhurried, each one deliberate without effort, as though he no longer needs to think about where to go or what to do next. He reaches the table and pauses, his eyes settling on the empty space where nothing waits for him anymore, and for the first time, that emptiness does not feel like loss. It feels like space. He pulls the folded letter from his coat and sets it down carefully, smoothing it once with his hand, not to preserve it, but to acknowledge it. The gesture is small, almost invisible, but it carries more meaning than anything he has done in years. He stands there for a moment longer, his gaze drifting toward the window where the last light of the day stretches across the glass in soft, fading lines. Outside, the forest remains still, the path hidden beneath distance and shadow, no longer calling, no longer pulling. It simply exists, as it always has. Daniel exhales slowly, the breath leaving him in a long, steady stream, and in that moment, something settles fully into place. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just completely. He moves toward the stove, kneeling slightly to stir the coals, adding a small piece of wood, the flame catching gently, growing just enough to bring a quiet warmth back into the room. The light flickers softly against the walls, casting familiar shadows that no longer feel like reminders of anything left behind, but reflections of where he stands now. Rex lifts his head briefly, watching, then lowers it again, content, present, exactly where he needs to be. Daniel rises and walks to the window, resting his hand lightly against the frame, his eyes moving across the landscape one last time before night fully settles in. There is no urgency in him now, no pull toward what lies beyond, only a quiet awareness that everything he needed to face has already been faced. He does not speak. He does not need to. The silence holds it all. After a while, he steps back, turning slightly toward the room, toward the small, steady fire, toward the dog who never left his side, toward the life that has been waiting for him to return not as someone escaping the past, but as someone who has finally made peace with it. He sits down slowly, the chair creaking softly beneath him, his posture relaxed in a way it has not been for years, his hands resting loosely, no longer holding onto anything that does not belong. Rex shifts closer, settling at his feet, his presence quiet, constant, enough. The fire burns low, steady, the light warm and unassuming, and the room fills with a calm that does not fade. Outside, the night takes its place over the forest, silent and wide, but inside, there is something different now, something that does not depend on what has been lost or what has been found. Daniel closes his eyes for just a moment, not in exhaustion, but in stillness, and when he opens them again, there is nothing left to search for. Only something to live with. And in that quiet, without needing to say it, without needing to prove it, the truth remains, simple and steady as breath. Some promises are not about bringing someone back. They are about never leaving them behind again.